When winter comes like this, the whole academy was covered with snow, the pond in the garden was also frozen. Inside the academy, there was a bakery called Laplace Bakery, the taste of the cakes made by the former royal pastry chef, and a terrace full of fragrant flowers. The premium desserts served from the Laplace Bakery were hard to get because they were always sold out. Janica looked very happy when tasting the dishes served there. Clara then said to her, how else could she lure her if not with this kind of bait? Hearing that, Janica felt that it sounded like she got tricked into coming here. Clara said that she would get to the point. She felt that she had reached a dangerous point. She had a big crush on Ed Roth Taylor. Hearing that, Janica then surprisedly asked, how did she know? Clara irritably replied, how could she not know? She also said that she didn't mean to stop her. Anise was just enjoying her hot chocolate in the midst of the commotion between the two of them. Clara continued, at first, she felt like she was really missing out, but because her assessment of Ed Roth Taylor was improving, she decided to just accept the situation. Janica didn't know what to say to that. But the problem was, Clara asked, if lately when she was with him her heart felt pounding so hard that she couldn't speak. Janica blushed to hear that. She then asked, why was she talking about this suddenly? Clara told her to just answer it, yes or no. Janica said, rather than feeling nervous or anxious, she felt more comfortable and warm. That's what she meant. Clara said that she was heading towards one of the bad endings of romance stories, namely being a comfortable female friend. Clara then scolded her best friend's stupidity. What was the point if her feelings were only unrequited? She had to make him thirst for her. Janica was really overwhelmed at this time, but Clara didn't stop there. If he was the only one expressing affection and following him around, she asked her, can it really be said to be a relationship? It's just a follower relationship. Janica's spirits then gave her a thumbs up for her words. While holding both of Janica's hands, Clara said that this was enough. After all, it was now winter vacation. That boy was quite handsome and strangely popular with girls, so she had to find a solution soon. She planned to go home to her family later. But she became agitated because of this. Clara then gave her a suggestion. Instead of clumsy push and pull tactics, she should trigger his protective instinct. Hearing that, Anise, who had been silently listening, agreed with her. She felt that Clara was really great. She was a person who had learned love through many romance stories. But the reason why other people's judgment of Ed Roth Taylor became good was largely influenced by Clara herself, because he was the boy that Janica liked. Clara had exalted Ed in front of Belle Maya, the academy staff, and her friends. Now, everyone seemed to trust Ed. But as for her opinion, it was a bit different. In Anisa's view, seeing her being scolded by the librarian for returning the book she borrowed late on the deadline, you could judge that she was an awkward person with a shy nature. Watching all these things, she wondered how she could even become a professor. The other professors who were already senior simultaneously referred to Professor Claire's ability as a talent for interacting with others. Coincidentally, she was actually mentored by prominent scholars such as Professor Glast and Professor Plubane. She received guidance and help from various scholars to complete her academic degree, and now, she is even said to be the best assistant professor. Although she is academically outstanding, Assistant Professor Claire has no talent in practical work, but with her help, they are able to handle all the important tasks. Seeing Anise carrying a heavy load in her hands, a male student then shyly offered to help her, smiling. She then turned to him and politely declined his help. She thanked him for his concern. Anise. She was a second-year student who was so reliable that even the experienced academy staff recognized her. She was the best advisor. The reason why the messy Professor Claire's private laboratory could always be tidy was because of Anisa's organizational skills. Anise then placed the documents she had brought on the table there. She collected personal information almost equivalent to the level of stalking by moving between the student library, Trix Hall, administration office, and the dormitory workroom. She could get into trouble if caught, but she could smoothly prevent suspicion with a twinkling smile. Except for her two best friends, Janica and Clara, almost no one knew her true nature. For Anise, human relationships were just a matter of changing masks. It was currently about 20 minutes until the professor returned from buying snacks at the bakery. During that time, she analyzes all the information related to Ed Roth Taylor and his background. While brewing a pot of tea, Anise then read the information about Ed that she had found from the Roth Taylor family, the strongest family in the Klol Empire. He was the second of the three main heirs. This general fact was useless, so she then tried to look at his history. In the year he was born, Crefin Roth-Taylor usurped the position of head of the family. He became the official heir at the age of 2, which made his nature become haughty. He was baptized by the church at the age of 5. He practiced ethics at the age of 8, and at the age of 12. He should have carried out various classes. Judging from his grades in the first grade, he was not a prodigy talent. After Anise started school, her family was in a precarious situation. And Anise, who was left to fend for herself, had to survive as a student assistant and Academy Scholarship recipient. She had such a strong survival instinct that she took Lortel as her role model. Even though she was 1 year younger than her, of course, Anise is not talented in reading the flow of money, but she has her own way. Anise then brought up the history of the Roth-Taylor family, the most powerful family in the Klol Empire, has 1 son and 2 daughters. Anise believes he must have grown up in a suffocating environment, which instilled authoritarian values. It is certain that he grew up without experiencing financial difficulties. He has no academic talent and did not show impressive abilities during his first grade. He is likely to lack self-confidence. He seems to like cheerful and gentle women. He is likely assertive but avoids responsibility. He might prefer people who offer unconditional approval rather than practical opinions. He hopes not to stand out too much, preferring to showcase his abilities. If someone is self-sacrificing, they may fit his ideal better. He feels more comfortable in relationships where he can dismiss people if necessary. He naturally prefers attractive appearances, likely favoring expensive items due to his upbringing. However, he might also find charm in simplicity. He has probably experienced few achievements, making him susceptible to praise. He likely enjoys discussing luxury items and dignity. He prefers giving gifts to showcase his wealth rather than receiving them. Given the situation, if he sees joy in receiving small gifts, he will likely develop a great fondness. Dependence over obsession, humility over competence, is key. He is likely sensitive to profit and loss, separate from his actual abilities. It would be advantageous to highlight his practical benefits as a person. Checking how his mindset has changed since being excommunicated would help adjust the approach. Determine his feelings for Yenica, ensuring he isn't easily swayed by others despite having affection for her. Even if he is, see if he feels guilt and remorse or is shallow and selfish enough to justify his behavior. Being his senior as a student assistant puts me in a favorable position. He doesn't seem to prefer assertive women, so striking a balance is key. His ideal type isn't too complex. It seems to mirror the patterned desires of those with a noble disposition. Recent environmental pressures have brought changes, but his core, built over many years, won't change fundamentally in just a year. While he might have become more reliable, his characteristic arrogance remains. In the end, it's not so difficult if you look at it this way. While smiling slightly, Anise wondered, shall I practice a bit? But, right at that moment, Assistant Professor Claire suddenly came. She said that she brought Mont Blanc from Laplace Bakery. She invited her to eat this first together and do the assignment afterwards. Seeing her who had brewed tea, Claire then praised her attitude. She had even anticipated that she brought snacks. But when Claire held the teacup and was about to drink it, she suddenly dropped the cup because it was still hot. Claire was then worried when she saw that. She felt that Anise would definitely nag her again for being careless, but then she was surprised. Instead of nagging her as usual, Anise instead worriedly asked her, was she hurt? Seeing her who was fine, she was grateful. She was very relieved to see that she was not hurt. Claire could only be stunned by Anise's uncharacteristic attitude. When Ed took back his washed uniform, he said that he was quite overwhelmed washing his uniforms even on holidays like this. This was a great help, so he thanked her. Hearing that, Maya said that just one extra uniform wasn't that much work. After all, she often served someone who relies on her. Lately, when washing Lucy's clothes, she saw a lot of blonde hair stuck there. Even when washing his clothes, there was the scent of the candle Lucy used and a lot of white hair stuck there. Hearing that, Hajin also thought that Lucy had been sticking to him lately. Not like usual, but he was surprised. How could she realize that just from washing his uniform once, it made him wonder, what would this person do if she didn't become a maid? Maya was silent for a moment. She then asked him, why did he still talk formally? Ed said that he felt comfortable like that, but Maya said that she preferred to speak casually, but Ed said that he preferred to speak formally. Ed did that not without reason. After all, with her position as a head maid, among the academic staff, it corresponds to a senior rank. For him, who is neither a noble nor a student of the Theophilus Hall anymore, it would be awkward if he spoke informally to her. but she was strangely insistent on this. Ed then said that he would still speak formally. After all, she was the head maid. There must be many people to manage and lots to worry about. Maya did not mind that. She asked him to speak as comfortably as he could. There were more people he had to take care of than her. Ed could only feel confused hearing that, but, while looking out the window, Maya said, excessive anxiety could be a burden on the mind. Whatever that girls decided, it was their own choice, anyway. Maya asked him to call her any time when he needed laundry. Right now, the workplace is stabilized, so fine. The restoration of the Ophilus Hall is also over. Ed was quite surprised to hear that. He didn't expect it to be restored in just one semester. He felt that the academy must have put a lot of effort into the restoration. Hearing that, Maya said it was because the new batch of students were coming, and among the 7 new residents that they need to take care of starting from this vacation period, one person has already registered for residence and is moving in. Hearing that, Ed knew who she meant. He asked, "That person is Tanya Roth-Taylor, right?" Maya confirmed that. She was not surprised to hear Ed knowing that. Ed sighed for a moment. He felt like the vacation period would be troublesome. His little sister is coming soon. In Ed's cabin, Zix was visiting there at this time. He said that it seemed like he was going home this vacation. Ed was quite surprised to hear that. He asked, "Why, is that librarian Ika going home too?" Zix was surprised to hear that. How could he know that? Zix exhaled for a moment. He said that he just wanted to spend time with Ika. He asked, was he going to stay in the cabin during the vacation? Hearing that, Ed wasn't sure either. He was about to become a third-year student. He should at least be able to use intermediate-level magic so as not to be embarrassed, so he planned to study. Hearing that, Zix then confusedly asked, wasn't it just a year ago? His magic was only at the most basic beginner level. He asked him not to push himself. He didn't feel any mana at all in his sensitivity. He asked, did he train his mana to the limit again? Ed did not answer. Seeing that, Zix then put his hand on his forehead. His hand felt a little warm at the moment. It seemed that he had a little fever. Zix asked, was he sure he was not pushing himself? Ed said that there was a reason. Seemed that he could not use magic for the time being. Hearing that, Zix felt that there was no need to worry about it anymore. Zix's best trait is his coolness. If he said there was a reason, he would definitely let it go, which made it less complicated. Zix then remembered something. He said that Isla asked about him. There seemed to be a misunderstanding, and she said she would bring Taylor to apologize. She asked for the location of his cabin, but he didn't tell her. He felt it was private information. Hearing that, Ed then told him to tell her that he didn't need an apology. He wasn't offended. He just didn't need an apology. He didn't hold any grudge against him either. Hearing that, Zix said, it's not so much forgiving, more like total indifference. Anyway, Ed then said to him, it turns out that he is good at keeping secrets too. While throwing a bag to him, Ed said that he wanted to ask for his help before he went home. This was his reward. He was given permission to use Professor Glass's underground library, but it was very messy. So he needed help to clean it up. Zix accepted the reward. He said that he didn't care about money. He thought of it more as in training. There's no problem. He also asked, what are you planning to use the library for? Ed said that he was going to use it as a workshop. Hearing that, Zix asked, you're also doing magic engineering, cabin, mana training, spirit magic, archery, and now magic engineering. Starting tomorrow, he was also going to work at the academy. Zix felt that a person like him was a person who would be successful. He just advised him not to overexert himself. Ed's activities during this winter break were really a lot. He even made a note of what he was going to do during this break, in Assistant Professor Claire's office. Anise then thanked the scholarship recipients in front of her for attending. She was representing Assistant Professor Claire at this time. Right now, Assistant Professor Claire was unable to communicate. Claire's appearance was very haggard at this time, like a zombie. Anise continued, after taking care of academic matters and because tomorrow is the deadline for the next semester schedule, she hasn't slept for 44 hours, so for important matters, she, the chief assistant, will take her place. There are 3 scholarship students called in at the moment. Among them are Ed, Clebius, and one unknown fat student. Anise continued. What scholarship recipients like them should do is get ready and supervise the new student placement exam later. Hearing that, Hajin then thought, the new student placement exam, every year, it is handled by Professor Glass, but this year, Assistant Professor Claire will be in charge, just like before. Of course she already knows the results. but it is a bit surprising that Clebius is also participating. Last year, the exam was held in the northernmost forest of the Arkan Mountain, but this year it will be held in the northwest corner, on Mount Oron, while handing a piece of paper to Clebius. Anis then explained his duties. He would take the supply orders from Trix Hall, and for Onyx, the name of the third student who was with Ed and Clebius, he will help Assistant Professor Claire with her duties. As for Ed Roth-Taylor, Anis paused for a moment. She thought, there is something that Clara and Janica did not notice. Ed Roth-Taylor has too many women around him. It can be seen from his face. He is a playboy. Since they will work together as a scholarship recipient, this is a good opportunity to test him. She stays up all night to study and embody his perfect ideal type. If he is a weak man who cannot stand her temptation, then she will definitely separate him from Janica. Anis then told him that he would come with her for the field survey. In the northwest of the academy, on Mount Oron, after climbing up there, Anis said that this was not a very high mountain, but a mountain is still a mountain. There are some places that are quite dangerous, and considering the season, if you slip in the snow, some students could be seriously injured. She also said that this was tiring. Seeing Ed, who still looked relaxed, Anis asked, "You don't seem tired at all." Seeing her complaining of being tired, Ed said that it was time for them to rest. He then invited her to rest for a while showing her charm. Anis thanked him. She also did not forget to praise his good stamina. He also cares about others. It seems like she was wrong about him. Ed could only feel confused hearing that. Anis asked, he must have realized it a bit, right? She is very close to Janica, so she is worried that she might hang out with the wrong people. That's why she might act a bit cold towards him. She felt that she had been cold to him all along, because of her worries. Hearing that, Ed said that it was fine. He didn't mind it. Ed actually didn't care much about it. While checking their visit list, Ed thought, now, the next point they should check. They should finish it as soon as possible. Ed then said to her that she might be exhausted from being the most reliable student assistant alone. She must be having a hard time too. Hearing that, Anis said that he had a point, but that wasn't the case. While embracing his hand, Anis said, because there are you, Ed, of course. The other two boys are very helpful too, but his being here really made her strong. She then apologized if she opened old wounds. She asked, but you were kicked out of your family, right? Anis said that she went through something almost the same. Right after she went to school, her family collapsed, but she really wanted to stay in this school, so she broke through it alone. It was like enduring a long and lonely winter alone. Anis closed her eyes for a moment as she recalled those sad memories. Ed was a little confused at this time. She clearly had the impression of someone who was persistent, financial problems or whatever. She had handled everything by herself. Ed then told her that she didn't need to push herself. Good job, she was able to survive until here. Hearing that, Anis thanked him. She said that they seemed to have a lot in common. Looking at her image that he had never seen before, Ed was confused. Wasn't she previously a more practical and realistic person rather than someone who was so sentimental? But as Anis was walking forward, she suddenly lost her balance. It made her fall in Ed's arms. Seeing that, Ed then immediately caught her and asked her to be careful. While blushing, Anis thanked him. She tripped over a rock. Ed was then confused to hear that, because he didn't see a single rock there. With a flushed face, Anis confusedly asked why her body was warming up like this. She then stutteringly said that she would calm down for a while. She asked Ed to just sit here for a while. She would come back. Ed could only feel confused at her behavior. After distancing herself from Ed, Anis then thought about her interaction with Ed earlier. From the outside, he seems really nice and reliable. She wondered, is he just pretending? It's hard to tell. A colleague who survived the academy life together. Their bond is like that. He seems reliable, but if you dig deeper, he is actually fragile and makes her want to protect him. She doesn't know if he likes more mature people or he prefers someone cute and younger, so she had been trying to do both, a little touch here and there, then ended with a touch under the guise of accident. Everything went according to plan. Anis was silent for a while. She then thought, maybe I got carried away. While blushing, she thought, regardless, she didn't expect it, but his physical body turned out to be good. Although he looks very intellectual, it turns out that his body is more muscular than she thought. She thought he was just a spoiled noble child who never tried. But it turns out that he is more competent than she thought. As for his face, Ed's face looks very handsome in Anis's eyes. It's fitting that Janica fell in love with him. While Anise was thinking about it deeply, she then understood something. So this is how he attracts girls. With her usual cold nature, Anise muttered, "But I'm different, Ed Roth Taylor." While Ed himself was now still standing where they were before. While waiting for Anise's arrival, Ed then admired the beautiful scenery in front of him. The view of Mount Oron can make us forget our worries temporarily. But there are some things that have no solution, no matter how hard we try. For example, the problem with Tanya Roth Taylor, the villainess. That's probably the best word to describe her. Tanya is a political genius, a child who fits the noble family. Her political instincts and talent for manipulation are natural. She aims to become the first freshman to become student council president in the history of Sylvania. Later, she will start influencing important figures in the academy. Belle Maya told him that Tanya arrived at the dormitory earlier than the others. She most likely did that to secure her power base before the semester started. Tanya Roth Taylor was not just an ordinary character in the background, she was an influential villain. Ed thought that he could prepare first because he still remembered some things, but the problem was how Tanya Roth Taylor would treat him. He didn't know that at all. Tanya might know, but he himself didn't know. It wasn't about others. It was about himself. Ed Roth Taylor was a small villain who appeared briefly and then disappeared. The material for his plot was not explored in great detail, and even his epilogue was easily forgotten. He is really an extra character, so, Ed realized, there were no clues to follow. None at all. That's why he thought this was an insurmountable problem. He once again wondered, how did Tanya Roth Taylor view Ed Roth Taylor? To Tanya Roth Taylor, Ed Roth Taylor was trash. That was roughly her impression of her sibling. She was now on her way to Sylvania. Sylvania was filled with stars, princess of the Klol Empire, the original leader of the Eltstor. The spirit sorcerer who was able to handle high-level spirits in her teenage years, the great alchemist who created the elixir of inscription, a ferocious child who used to rule the northern vegetation zone, the sword demon of the Nortondale family, a fighter who mastered the swordsmanship ceremony, and the most extraordinary among them, the genius magician who might have received the star blessing from the Archmage Glocked. Just thinking about it already makes her heart beat because she can't wait to meet those dignified figures. It's only natural that she admires them. In this Sylvania Academy, she will blend in among them and live a satisfying academy life. When she arrived at the academy, a maid then told her that the luggage she sent was taken care of by the maids. Her room was in the second room on the third floor. After Tanya got out of the carriage, she then asked her to help clear the entry procedure through the attendant. She had to stop by somewhere first. The maid understood. Her first task in Sylvania, the land of knowledge that she admired so much, was to get rid of the family disgrace, that Ed Roth Taylor. Tanya felt disgusted when she remembered him. While waiting for someone she asked to meet, she then read a letter written by her father. Krefin in the letter said, "Hearing your resolutions makes me happy as your father. I really want to support your ambitions, represent me and build connections with them, expand your influence." Tanya was very touched reading the letter. She then promised her father that she would fulfill his expectations. Before heading to Sylvania, the land of knowledge, she conveyed 2 resolutions to her father. Krefin told her, Sylvania will show her respect as befits her status, but in essence, this is a place to study. Even the princess treated the professors there with respect, because they were mentors of learning. He told her not to be presumptuous just because of her noble status. Anyone who was a grade higher than her was her senior. Seeing the arrival of the person she was waiting for, Tanya then thanked her for her time. She said, she should have known about that guy right, so there was no need for her to explain at length. He was a stain on their family and a thorn-like human being. She grew up with him, so she knew him very well. Hearing that, the person said, "You must have had a hard time," while smiling slightly. Tanya said that her childhood was not as difficult as hers. She also silently thought, driving this conversation naturally is not so difficult. Tanya continued, "He is full of pretense and does not know anything about politeness, like a barbarian, that kind of person. Just because of his age, he held the position of successor to the head of the family." As the conversation between the two of them progressed, this was quite surprising to Tanya. She apparently only had to give a few topics and they agreed so quickly over their dislike for him. Tanya said that he can't be serious. He just liked to feel a little and then give up, but his arrogance was so great that he never admitted his incompetence. He only just felt a little resonance magic, but already acted like he was some kind of grand magician. When he finally made it into Sylvania, she was completely stunned at that time. but seeing him causing chaos and ending up like this, it was honestly satisfying. Tanya never thought that Ed's severe reputation could come in handy like this. Hearing that, her interlocutor then asked, "So," Tanya continued, "surely, someone like her must have quickly figured out his true self, that's why, this time," but, she suddenly felt hesitant to continue her words. She then finally realized, this is not called talking. She was just talking to herself from earlier. He then remembered the message his father had conveyed before meeting her. Always remember this when meeting someone who Dad introduced you to. Show respect for her, especially for negotiations and transactions. Never underestimate your interlocutor. It will definitely be a valuable experience for you. But Crefin suddenly did not continue his words at that time. She and her father at that time were acquainted in a project related to the Sage's Scroll. Tanya then told herself to stay strong. Seeing her suddenly silent, Lortel then asked, "Why?" She told her to continue what she said earlier. "Tell her." Tanya suddenly felt nervous when she heard that. She felt like her body was being wrapped around a big snake at the moment. It made her suffocate. Tanya then nervously said that it was nothing. She politely asked, if she could ask, was she angry? Lortel grinned at that. She then asked her back, what did she mean? With a sly smile, Lortel said that this was interesting. In the list of winter break activities that Ed has made include, plan to organize the office, build a storage building for materials, expand the cabin, check the scenario, review the scholarship students' assignments, advance at least 3 levels in magic engineering, learn special skills in the archery category, master intermediate magic theory, contract with high-level spirits. In these 9 activities, Ed has already fulfilled some of them. He has now just finished reading 2 intermediate magic acquisition books, Single Point Explosion and Origins Wind. He took the 2 books from Professor Glast's library last night. This is very convenient because he can read all the books there without having to have a return deadline. He has also completed most of the scholarship assignments for today, although his activities are so many in this winter break. But he feels that Anise is more difficult than him. Ed then lit a bonfire in front of his cabin to warm up, but he then just remembered that he couldn't use magic anymore for a while. Because of that, he also couldn't apply what he had learned. He could only master the theory. When Ed walked into his room, he then saw someone who was already sleeping there. Previously she would appear in unexpected places and ways, but now he was used to her movements. Ed then immediately removed the blanket that covered the person. That person was of course Lucy. He then immediately woke her up and asked her to light the fire, but Lucy was still fast asleep. Ed even had to carry her body. Carrying her is no longer difficult now. It was honestly quite surprising how light her body was, even for a teenager. After arriving in front of the firewood that he had piled up to make a bonfire, Ed then asked her to light it. Lucy then immediately pointed at the firewood and a blazing fire appeared right after that. Seeing that, Ed then thanked her, and when Ed was about to put Lucy back into the cabin room, Lucy then said that she wanted to live outside too. Ed understood. When Lucy sniffed her clothes, she then said that she could smell perfume. Ed just said, really, after working all day with Anise for a scholarship assignment, it seems like the scent of her perfume sticks to him. Lucy continued. Besides, with a worried look on her face, she asked, do you have a fever or are you unwell? Hearing that, Ed asked, does it seem that obvious? Lucy asked him not to get sick. If he got sick, he could die. Lucy then stretched out her hand to his chest and said, if his mana was messed up, she could fix it, but after she checked it, she then knew the cause. His mana was not messed up, but drained. He was really pushing himself. Hearing that, Ed said that he could still handle it. Lucy then said to him, after the winter is over, he will probably be much stronger. She then asked him, can she ask him for a strange request? Ed was then confused by that. Lucy asked, can he stroke her head? After that, Lucy then leaned her head on his thigh and let Ed stroke her head. Lucy looked very comfortable at this time, but, in this moment of togetherness between the two of them, someone suddenly came there and called Ed. It was Lortel. Seeing her, Ed then asked, you came here because of the request I made at that time, right? You should have just told me to come to the company. I would have been there. Lortel said that it was not necessary. After all, she came here because she had some things to talk about, while looking at Lucy who was lying comfortably on his thigh. Lortel said that she also had things to ask her. Around the academy, Tanya was currently offering something to Aika. She thanked her for listening to the end, although it became a bit long. The point was simple. if she helped her conquer that person, she would give her a big reward. For example, the island family she belonged to was famous for their leading archaeological scholars, right? She could share some valuable antiques stored in the Roth-Taylor family warehouse. Aika looked very excited. To hear that, there was also Zix, who had been listening to their conversation. He suddenly interrupted their current conversation. Aika was then confused by it. Zix then asked her, "You are Tanya Roth-Taylor, right?" As Tanya looked at him, various judgments about Zix then appeared in her head. He had a very fit body, and she could clearly feel the mana flowing inside it. Tanya decided that she should make him side with her. With an intimidating look directed at her, Zix then asked, "Are you Senior Ed's younger sister?" Tanya nervously replied yes, but she was then confused. When Zix's aura suddenly changed and became calm, Zix smiled at that, while chuckling. He then said to Aika, "You heard that right, this is Senior Ed's younger sister." While giving something to her, Zix then said that this was the magic engineering tool they used in the basic class of the new batch. She didn't need to buy a new one, just use this. This can make it easier to practice her mana resonance. Tanya could only feel confused at his sudden change in attitude. Zix then remembered. He then asked Aika, "Did she keep the cheat sheet for Professor Delroff's elemental science class?" Aika replied yes, she kept it. She almost accidentally threw it away. After that, they then immediately gave various things and all the cheat sheets they had to Tanya. Zix said that having a cheat sheet was very influential. Zix then asked Aika, did she still have the flower crown they used in Professor Halen's class. They both looked very satisfied after they helped the younger sister of their respected senior, while Tanya herself was really confused at the moment. Her hands currently seemed to be struggling to support the items they gave her because of how much it was. She then asked them, did they actually listen to her request properly? They then finally remembered that it was about doing something to Ed. While exhaling, Zix said yes. He said that a pair of brothers would always have a hate but love relationship. They never got along. Ed's senior personality did make him easy to misunderstand. Aika then told Zix that the ship would be leaving soon. Right before he left, Zix then introduced himself to her. "I am Zix. I'll be in the 2nd grade this year. Ed and I are senior and junior. We owe a lot to each other, so we are quite close." Zix said that she has the same determined face as her brother. She seems to be someone who is destined to excel. While putting his hand on her shoulder, Zix said, "Being born into a prosperous family and a nice house is a great blessing, right?" But what he didn't know was that it only added to the burden that Tanya was already struggling to support. As he walked away, Zix and Aika then both encouraged her, and right at that moment, she could only let herself fall while being crushed by the things they gave her. Tanya was completely confused by what was happening at the moment. In Assistant Professor Claire's office, after finishing the work for today, in a languid tone, Claire then praised the work they had done. Her face looked very exhausted at the moment. She was like a zombie. Anise then said, if they can take care of the new batch's class exams well next week, they could enjoy resting for the rest of the break period. Seeing Anise, who looked still fit, Claire wondered, is this what is called youth? She is really different, even though it has been 2 days, but her energy is still as strong as iron. Anise is a little disappointed at this time. The scholarship students are really unreliable, whether it is Onyx from the 3rd grade, or Clebius from the 1st grade. They are never smooth in doing things. In the end, she has to rework everything. At least, Ed Roth-Taylor was a little different from them. She didn't see any mistakes in his documents. During their field survey in Mount Oron, Ed said, they should close this entrance first because the students might accidentally pass through here. The road here is very slippery. If on the exam day it remains this slippery, it could cause problems later. Ed's level of practical problem-solving ability is not commonly seen in high-ranking nobles. Honestly, she was surprised. It seems that his life is not just spoiled. While sipping hot tea, Claire then approached her and asked, you have been close to Ed lately, right? She then asked her opinion, aren't you two very similar? Anise was quite surprised by her sudden question. Claire asked her to keep this a secret from Ed. She then told her, she was forced to follow him around during the Ophilus Hall occupation incident to investigate. And when she followed him to the northern forest, she then saw something surprising. He apparently built a camp that is bigger and better than this laboratory. From the equipment and workbench, as well as the campfire and drying rack, there is also a smoke rack. It seems that he made it all by himself. It can really be felt how earnest he is to survive. She also did not expect his academic grades to suddenly increase that high. Even Professor Glast recognized him. He also made a contract with spirits. The training to sense spirits has a high entry barrier. She doesn't know how he can do it, but certainly, he must have worked very hard. Anise was really surprised to hear that. She then thought, there is a small sign why he is strangely very capable in practical matters. Obviously he is not just a nobleman living in a glass house. Claire continued, besides that, you guys turned out to be similar. Anise was confused about how to answer that. Anise then said that she appreciated that high assessment. After she thought about it, Anise felt that Ed was definitely not a bad guy, but there was no way she could encourage Janica to have a beautiful love just based on other people's opinions. After she got to know him well, there was nothing she could criticize about him. He was just someone who was ordinary and didn't do anything wrong. After coming to that thought, Anise then wondered, could it be that he is really that good? He looks charming. He is not so haughty. Even Assistant Professor Claire looks favorably on him. He also turns out to have a soft side too. She didn't know this by accident, but his body turned out to be very good, and the scent of his body turned out to be comfortable. It can be said, he is good at taking care of himself. Seeing Anise, who was silent all this time, Claire then asked, why are you daydreaming? But Anise suddenly kicked the table and stood up. While opening the window, Anise said that it was a bit hot in here. Do we just open the window? Claire said okay, let the fresh air in. Just make sure the papers don't fly. But she then panicked when she saw the documents that were neatly arranged on the table began to fly in the wind. Seeing her suddenly acting strange, Claire then asked her, are you okay? It seems like you are overexerting yourself. But Anise did not answer her question. Her heart and mind were in turmoil at the moment. She felt this was bad. This was really not good. This was a serious problem. With a blushed face, Anise wondered, what should I do? But she then realized something, remembering Claire who said that Ed made a contract with the spirit. Anise realized that there was no way Ed could make a contract with the spirit in such a short time by himself. Janica must have helped Ed resonate with the spirit. His spirit must also be very great and reliable, someone Janica could always trust. Anise's body suddenly trembled at this moment. Not realizing that, Claire then asked her, our work is done, do you want a snack, or do I buy something else instead? But she was then confused when she saw Anise suddenly just leave from there, in the northern forest, in the place where Janica and her spirit usually hung out. Janica was seen standing there quietly at the moment. The Feylover family motto is harmony and togetherness. Her caring nature and warm heart always make her shine. Janica's life is far from being alone, because she has always made many sincere friends during her life. But life without anxiety does not exist in this world. She looks sad at the moment. She seems to know the interaction between Anise and Ed on Mount Oron. But an unexpected guest suddenly visited her at this time. She was Tanya. Tanya then greeted her and said that she wanted to introduce herself and talk. While she was talking with Lortel earlier, Lortel whispered to her, Janica Feylover from the 3rd class, a real trump card known for her popularity, ability, and reputation. She is someone who must side with her for her goals. Tanya's body shook violently when Lortel suddenly approached her and whispered to her. While sweating profusely, Tanya then thanked her. Looking at Janica, who was just silent, Tanya then asked, is it okay, Janica Sr.? But she was then shocked and confused when a fiery aura suddenly appeared around Janica at this time. Lortel at that time told her not to worry. Janica was very kind and caring. She would listen and believe what anyone said, but when she saw Janica's demon-like appearance at this time, Lortel's words were really hard to believe. In Ed's cabin, the sky was already dark at this time with the crescent moon clearly visible above. Ed and Lortel were sitting leisurely in front of the cabin at this time. Lortel then said, most of the materials he requested had been collected, but it was difficult to find legendary grade items. Those items were difficult to obtain during the winter. Ed did not mind that. After all, he knew that she was busy. So he thanked her for helping him. Lortel asked him not to think too much about it. She regarded this as a side task only. Hearing that, Ed then asked her, why did you bother to come here to report it to me, when you could have rested? You traveled quite a distance to get here. Lortel asked him not to worry. She said, she just came here to rest. The crescent moon, the moon that was originally circular now faded, leaving little trace. Time seemed to pass so quickly, because life was so busy. Winter came. Hibernation also enveloped everyone together with the same silence. but everyone received it with a different attitude. For Ed, winter is a test to protect oneself from the bitter cold. It is also a time for him to develop into a better self. Although it is a busy time to prepare, for those who have gone through such a thing, winter awakens their sense of solitude. As if walking on a lonely road, winter seems to have such a magical power attached to it. With a feeling of doubt filling her heart, Lortel then called him. She asked, "Why is Lucy sleeping on your lap?" Hearing that, Ed replied, "Because it's winter." Lortel really couldn't understand his answer. She then didn't know what else to say. She then could only sigh helplessly. Lortel said, honestly, if she just wanted to discuss about magic engineering supply, she wouldn't have come all the way here. Hearing that, Ed then asked, "Is there any other reason?" Lortel smiled hearing that. While taking out some kind of book, she told him not to pretend not to know. Looking at the book, Ed knew what she meant. He asked, "Did you finally make an offer?" Lortel replied, "Of course, the book is the Sage's Scroll." She can ask anything from Ed with it, while also taking out the letter that Ed had sent her that time. Lortel then smiled sweetly. She said, "This is an interesting story, right?" He asked her to bid for the Sage's Scroll. In return he will do anything for her. As a merchant, it's only right for her to get back the money she has spent. Ed could only surrender at this time. He then asked, "What kind of help do you want?" Lortel then whispered to him. She said that she would not make such a big request that it would burden him. Lortel only asked him to support her. Ed was quite surprised by her request. He then remembered, it was Act 3. The conflict between Princess Phinia and Lortel was about to begin. Lortel, sensing this, began to formulate her plan. The kind Princess Phinia Elias Kloll. She was destined to be Lortel's lifelong rival. According to the original scenario, she would become student council president, rule the academy, and build her influence, and with her power, she will become a key figure in Act 4, as the revealer of the dark secrets of the Roth-Taylor family. While Ed was deep in thought, Lortel then continued, "For everyone who lives in this academy, there will come a time for them to choose one side, either side A or side B. When the time comes," Lortel asked him to please support her. That's all she asked. Hearing that, Ed thought, Phinia and Lortel, who will be the winner in their feud? It all depends on who will ally with Taylor. In the end, it's not him who decides. Ed then said to her, even if he supports her, it doesn't seem to be very helpful. Lortel also felt the same way. Although his reputation improved, his support did not produce significant results. After all, he is just an ordinary student. Hearing that, somehow it feels strange after hearing it from her. While smiling widely, Lortel continued, "But so what? This is not about the politics of gain and loss. It's just that it's important for her to know whether he supports her or not." Hearing that, Ed then accepted her request. After all, it is not too difficult, but he was then shocked when he saw Lortel burn the letter that was proof of their agreement. Lortel revealed her plan with a seductive smile. She was the girl with 1,000 faces, but, while smiling sweetly at him, Lortel said that she was happy. Ed wondered if she could continue to express like that, since it was a holiday. Of course there would be no classes and assignments for the scholarship students, although he thought of sleeping until noon and relaxing after a long time for the first time. In the end he woke up early because it had become a habit. Seeing Lucy, who was still half awake, Ed asked, "Can you light a fire for me?" Without saying a word, Lucy then lit the bonfire using her magic. Ed had a long chat with Lortel last night, but something was stuck in his mind. Lortel at that time asked him, "You have a younger sister, right? I think she's been preparing something. It's hard to know if they see you as a family enemy, or it's just a mild rivalry between siblings." To be honest, she felt it was a bit funny, so she introduced her to some people. And she said she'd go meet them all today. She might come to see him tomorrow morning and scold him. Hearing the sound of footsteps of some people heading to his cabin, Ed then thought, so, she finally came. The younger sibling of the body he possessed. Who knows what relationship they have? It's a mystery. No matter how hard I think about it, I don't know anything. Ed realized there was nothing he could do. Looking at the brother he hadn't seen for a long time, Tanya then greeted him with a little stammer. She said that she brought a gift for him because they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Looking at Tanya, who was sweating profusely and seemed unwilling to look him in the eye, Ed wondered, was she nervous? Was she embarrassed? He felt like she was scared, but at least he didn't see any resentment. But then he finally realized, as long as Ed was in the family mansion, he was living a decent life. He could only lament for jumping to conclusions too quickly. He sarcastically thought, "Good job, Ed Rothtailor. Seeing Ed, who suddenly patted his head in frustration, it reminded Tanya of the nightmares she repeatedly had in the past. Ed at that time really did something arbitrary. He threw the food served by the maid and scolded her. "How dare you serve food like this to the future head of the Rothtailor family?" Looking at Tanya, who seemed not to see the events in front of her, Ed with a sardonic smile said, "Your ability to turn a blind eye to the events in front of you is really impressive. You really mastered the art of social tact and reading the situation." Ed's nature at that time was completely inversely proportional to the current Ed. He behaved so arrogantly and haughtily as if no one could oppose him in this world. Ed then stepped on the head of the maid who served him the food. The maid could only forcefully accept it while enduring the pain. Tanya's hands trembled as she watched that very tragic scene. She could not stand it anymore. She then shouted, asking him to please stop it. The environment was silent when Tanya shouted like that at him. But she then regretted her actions. Ed asked her, "Why did you do that? Did you feel pity or sympathy for these tools?" With a sadistic smile, Ed said, "It seems that you have not become a true noble yet." But Ed's violent nature at that time was not at all seen in the current Ed. While smiling happily, Ed then thanked her for the gift. He said he would use it well. He would wear it starting next semester. As she knew, he was currently not recognized by the family. He was no longer her brother, but she still treated him like this. He was grateful. Tanya could only be stunned to hear that. Ed asked her not to just stand there. Sit by the fireplace and wait for a while. As Ed entered the cabin, he muttered that there were not many tea leaves left, so he decided to just finish it. Seeing Lucy lying nearby, Tanya then asked, "Who is that child?" Ed asked her not to care about her. He also told Lucy not to stay still, and give them some space. While carrying 2 cups of hot tea in his hand, Ed then asked her, "I heard that you have toured the academy and met some people." Tanya confirmed it. She also said that she heard a lot of things about him. Ed was quite surprised to hear that. He said that he didn't have many acquaintances, so he felt that it might be Zix or Janica. They immediately became tense when they heard Janica's name. Ed then asked, "Did she meet her? She's a nice person, right?" Of all the people he knew, she was the kindest in attitude and heart. Tanya could only agree to that. She said that she was so kind, so incredibly kind. She was very kind. Tanya emphasized that repeatedly to make Ed believe her words. Tanya continued, "Plus, she was very strong, that high fire spirit in the form of a fire lizard. She summoned it and threw people around like toys. Not only did she insist she wouldn't leave her alone if she didn't answer correctly, but she was also kind and graceful. She even encouraged her to do her best in the academy." Ed then felt anxious hearing Janica summon the high spirit, feeling that she had blurted out. Tanya immediately said that she didn't do it. She really didn't. It was probably just her imagination. She had just heard a rumor that the high spirit looked like that, so she just made up a story like that. Ed could only sigh at that. He had expected it. There was indeed something strange. The Tanya he remembered was not a shy person. After all, everyone who had met Ed Rothtailor must have a bad impression on him. Ed then called her. Tanya nervously answered his call. Ed said, "At present, he is living on his own," so he asked her not to look at him too badly. He is just a nobleman who was excommunicated for his penance. He realized that he had acted arbitrarily while still living in the mansion. He regretted it very much. There were many things he could not fix, but he asked her to forgive him. Ed also said, he heard she wanted to be student council president. He said he would support her. Maybe he wouldn't be too helpful, but he knew she always worked hard. So he told her to cheer up, but Ed knew, even if he said such things, Tanya would not be able to become student council president. Because Tanya was just a villain used to increase Fenia's popularity, but still, since she was the first blood relative he met, no matter what, he felt attached to her. But, looking at her expression, he didn't know which direction their relationship would go. Tanya looked very nervous at the moment. Sweat was pouring down her face. Her eyes looked blank as if she was facing something terrible. After Tanya finally returned to her dormitory, she then sighed tiredly. She was almost caught off guard for a moment. She knew that bastard's true nature, but, still, she was almost burned alive while vilifying that person in front of her. There was one thing she realized at that time: sincere anger. Janica seemed to really believe and follow that person wholeheartedly. However, she felt that it was strange. Sylvania was filled with elites. Even its best student, Lucy Merrill, was a genius mage who appeared once in a lifetime. In a place filled with such people, no matter how well Ed Rothtailor acted, his true nature would have been revealed by now. but she was then surprised when she saw someone who was in Ed's cabin earlier appeared there. That person was of course Lucy. Their rooms turned out to be next to each other, she lamented, even in the best dormitory, Awfulest Hall. There were people who were imperfect, clumsy, and not graceful. She then realized, there was no perfect place in this world. She also felt that Ed was just lucky. Seeing her, Lucy then asked, "Are you her sister?" While standing on tiptoe, Lucy then put her hand on her shoulder. She said, if she was in trouble, she could come to her. After saying that, Lucy then went back into her room. Tanya didn't know what to say seeing that. But, she was then stunned, even in the best dormitory, Awfulest Hall. Only the best students were entitled to use the golden nameplate. After reading the name on the nameplate, she was then shocked. She did not expect that the person she looked bad at turned out to be the genius mage who appeared once in a lifetime, Lucy Merrill. In the Rose Garden, Anise and Belle Maya were having a meeting there. With a passionate attitude, Anise then asked her to please introduce her to a boy, preferably a tall, handsome, and talented boy, because she had worked as a maid in the Awfulest Hall for a long time. She was sure she must know many boys like that. Hearing that, Maya then asked her, "Aren't you the type of person who doesn't like just meeting a boy, let alone that? Do you even have any dating experience?" Anise could only remain silent while feeling depressed hearing that. Seeing that, Maya then immediately apologized to her. She didn't mean to say anything bad. In her view she was always very busy and focused on taking care of things herself, so she thought she wasn't interested in romance. It reminded her of Ed, who would be going to 3rd grade later. If she thought about it, the two of them had a lot in common. But, looking at Anise who was just silent, Maya could only look at her worriedly. But she was then surprised when she saw her suddenly dizzily holding her head. Anise said that she had expected this. She couldn't lie to her eyes. She confirmed her guess. It was exactly what she thought. The rumors about him were so bad that she came to see him to check it out herself. But it turned out that he was very easy to talk to, unlike what people thought, and they also turned out to have a lot in common. He's a thoughtful and considerate person, so she wouldn't mind being with him. Maya could only be dumbfounded to hear that. She then hesitantly asked, "Are you and Ed?" Anise confirmed it. She admitted it. She was a little attracted to him as the opposite sex, but she felt that this was actually a good thing, when considered, if he was someone who could make her feel like that. It meant that Janica had found a very suitable lover, so, if she could overcome her feelings quickly, then there would be no more problems. Hearing that, Maya then hesitantly called her. Anise continued, "If we compare this to a malignant tumor, then it is good news that we have found out so soon. In this world there is not only one man. If she finds someone else to replace him and they spread rumors that they are lovers." Hearing that, Maya then immediately realized something. She then asked her, "Does Janica already know about her feelings?" Anise was stunned to hear that. She seemed to have not thought about it at all. Maya explained, "Firstly, looking for a replacement man was a big insult to the person in question, even if it was you. She never thought she was this cold before. You're trying to date someone new, because you want to be able to think, yes, my feelings are elsewhere now, right?" Hearing that, Anise then said, "Honestly, yesterday she passed by the teacher's building and bumped into Janica. They didn't even greet each other. The atmosphere between the two of them felt very awkward, and Janica's expression looked dark, with a trembling body." Anise said, "And next week, she has to supervise the new student placement exam with Ed. She feels very guilty. She doesn't know how to deal with her. She was really confused about what to do." Hearing that, Maya then said, "Maybe it's actually not as bad as she thought." Anise was surprised to hear that. Maya thought it might actually be a positive thing. Anise could only feel confused hearing that. Maya explained, "Janica has always been kind and sincere to others, and you two have always protected her from getting hurt. But the problem is, hasn't Janica been too perfect for everyone? Sometimes, that kind of perfection is not a good thing." Maya then walked over to her. She said that she was surprised by the side of her that she saw today. She was glad that she trusted her enough to share this with her. Maya continued her explanation, "Therefore, sometimes a little imperfection can make someone more attractive. It's something that people call protective instinct." Hearing that, Anise then realized something. She then recalled Clara's words that told Janica to provoke Ed's protective instinct. Her mind immediately became clear at this time. She was finally able to organize her thoughts after Maya encouraged her not to fall guilty, and after that, she then thought of Janica. She couldn't help but smile as her figure appeared in her head. She also couldn't hold back her tears anymore at this time. She clearly knew where Janica would go when she was bothered and troubled. Looking at Janica, who was sitting gloomily in front of his cabin, Ed then confusedly asked her, "What's wrong? When did you come here?" But Janica just remained silent at his question. Ed thought that he should start refining the materials for the construction of the shed. He wanted to expand the storage and make the living room bigger, but judging from his winter plans, he seemed to have to do it as soon as possible. Looking at Janica, who was just sitting there silently as if ignoring his existence, Ed paused for a moment. He then made her a cup of hot tea. While looking up, Ed then opened the conversation. It was snowing again. Lately the snow had piled up quite a bit. It seemed to snow every 2 days or so. If there was something bothering her mind, Ed said that she could talk to him about it. Janica was silent for a moment. She then apologized. She couldn't say it. Ed didn't mind that. She didn't need to insist on telling him then. Janica was then surprised when Ed suddenly covered her body with some kind of blanket to avoid the cold. Sometimes Ed forgot that Janica must also often have difficulties in living her academic life. Her depressed expression reminded him of a small animal. It's hard to him to just brush her off in that cold weather. They then leaned on each other and warmed themselves in front of a small campfire. The winter continued to pass, with only a blanket and a campfire. Enduring the cold air was difficult. Even so, spring slowly approached, slowly driving away the cold air brought by winter. There were a lot of times that father, the patriarch, left because of business in the place, but the Roth-Taylor residence was always peaceful. However, after the heir and oldest daughter, Arwen Roth-Taylor, died, a new heir dominated, and everything changed. That person is none other than Ed Roth-Taylor. A question then arises, what kind of person is Ed Roth-Taylor? There is a saying, if you want to see the true nature of a person, give him a power. Just by tasting a little power as the heir, he acted as if the whole world was his. Tanya looked at her brother as a pathetic piece of trash. Seeing Tanya, who looked at him with a hateful gaze, while turning the table, Ed then asked, "Why are you looking at me like that? Do you want to kill me?" While picking up a knife that was now lying on the floor, Ed then invited her. He said, "Since Arwen is dead, isn't everything going smoothly now?" While handing the knife into her hand, Ed then hysterically said, "If you kill me now, the position of heir will be yours." Tanya could only freeze seeing his attitude. Seeing his sister who was just silent, Ed then asked, "What are you waiting for?" He told her to do it immediately. "Stab me with all your strength." Tanya was completely overwhelmed in the face of his attitude. She then could only let her body sit limply on the floor. She could not do it. Seeing that, Ed then laughed with satisfaction. That's how Tanya's daily life was at that time. In a moment, her breath seemed to leave her body. Then, he would once again look down on her with those eyes. She lived her whole life depressed under that gaze. He never hurt her physically, because they were born with the same blood, in a situation where no one, nor family nor house staff, could help. She lived as a spiritless being. She lived as if she was dead, until finally, an opportunity came. It was the moment when Ed Roth-Taylor was expelled from the family. Since he was already expelled, the only thing left for her now was to prove herself. The upcoming student council president election was her only chance. The first step in her plan was the new student placement exam. Time rolls on, until finally we arrive at the day of the new student placement exam. The exam invigilators such as Anise, Ed, and Claire are heading to the exam location now. Seeing Ed who is walking behind her, Anise told him not to come close. She said, his smell, his looks, his aura, whatever it is, Anise said that they don't match, so she told him not to go near her. Ed could only feel confused by her unclear behavior, but because he knew Anise was a smart person, so he thought she must have her own reasons for being like that. Not noticing the atmosphere between the two of them, Claire then said, "I think I've explained all the rules." She then invited them to go upstairs and prepare for the exam now. Act 3 of The Failed Swordsman of Sylvania. New student placement exam. Different from the previous year's exam which was located in the Northern Forest, this year's placement exam is held in Mount Oron. Due to the absence of Professor Glast, Assistant Professor Claire will be the exam holder, so there are some changes, different from the previous test, where they are required to find the magic bead hidden in the mountains. The magic stone, as the object that the students will look for in this test, is not hidden deeply, and there is no special point system. They only need to find the magic stone and put it on the altar of substitution. This is a test to aim for Class A. At first glance it may sound easy, But, master and disciple are not much different. In Claire's mind, the students must try hard if they want to get into Class A. Class A is not a joke. In this exam, they must fight and conquer a lot of monsters and beasts. Only students who survive can get into Class A, because the difficulty is really crazy. This exam is said to be the survival hell of Mount Oron. In the end, among the students of the new batch of Sylvania Academy this year, no one managed to get into Class A. Ed sighed at the thought of that, of course. This was all part of the fixed scenario. This event, where no one made it into Class A, was related to an important upcoming event, so it had to go exactly as in the original scenario. That's why he didn't even protest to Assistant Professor Claire regarding the difficulty level. Ed thought he might have to write an apology letter later, but at least he felt relieved. Because even though this survival exam was extreme, none of the new students became casualties, since they will be fighting imaginary monsters based on the magic engineering item they'll set up, the Vision Disc. It's an item that can summon low-level monsters or beasts. Their work will end after setting up the disc and prepping for safety. That purple Vision Disc is the most important. From what Ed knows, the reason no one makes the A class is because of that. The purple disc is called Illusion Disc. The item can summon high-level monsters or beasts. Anise should be commended for being responsible and willing to handle such an important item herself, but, seeing her struggling to carry the item, Onyx then said, "If you have trouble, you can leave it to me, you keep getting left behind." Anise thanked him. This item is too heavy for her, and when Anise was about to hand it over to him, Ed suddenly came at this time and asked her to give it to him. Anise was stunned for a moment at this time. She was then very surprised when she saw him. It made her lose her balance and was about to fall to the ground, but, fortunately Ed was able to quickly catch her. Anise's face was so red from blushing when the distance between her and Ed was so close at this time, but Ed was then shocked when he saw the purple disc that Anise was originally carrying, now rolling down the mountain. He was very panicked because it was the most important item in this exam, but fortunately, before the disc fell too far, Clebius was able to quickly catch it. Clebius asked, "Shouldn't you be more careful? What if it gets damaged?" Ed sighed with relief at that. Top-ranked students are indeed reliable. They almost messed up the whole scenario from the beginning of this semester, but, when Clebius was about to hand over the disc to the two of them, the disc suddenly broke and snapped into two. Looking at the disc that had now become pieces and scattered on the ground, they could only stare in shock. Clebius then confusedly asked, "Now what?" After waking up from his shock, Ed then released his grip from Anise. He had somewhat expected this. Everything went too smoothly.
Last year's joint combat training was about Taylor, the failed swordsman, who turned his weapon into a sword, then defeated Lucy, and became the highlight of the event. Although the scenario deviated far from the original, and even led to Janika's brief tantrum, this year's joint combat training was still an important event. The content of this episode was about the talented elite first-year students. Challenge a generation of protagonists who are already experienced and have built their reputation in battle implementation. When the duel began, the term training became meaningless, as the first-year students recklessly exerted their strength without restraint. With the arrogance of someone who had not known the height of the sky, they recklessly attacked, using everything they had. But then, with a wooden sword in his hand, Taylor broke all the attacks they threw and broke all the arrogance they had. After growing very strong for more than a year, Taylor left an unforgettable mark in everyone's minds. Realizing Taylor's greatness, which was the closing of the scene, Clarice, who hid her true identity and melted with the audience, touched by Taylor's development. The relationship between Taylor and St. Clarice, one of the four heroines, is important. In Act 3, Lucy's showdown, and even in the stories afterwards, her strength will be needed. As such an important character, this event must go according to the original scenario. For that to happen, the elite first-year students must go on a rampage according to the scenario. The reason for their rampage was actually simple. It was because none of them made it into Class A during the placement exam. And the reason why none of the students made it into Class A was because of Assistant Professor Claire's enthusiastic use of this purple disc during the exam. But now, the purple disc was broken. It was really giving them a headache. Claire felt that it seemed that the circuit itself was broken. They might have to send a repair request to the academy to fix it. Clebius really couldn't accept this, even though they had worked hard. Why did this have to happen? While they were confused about what to do, Anise herself now felt depressed and guilty. She then apologized to them. She realized that she should have been more careful. After thinking for a while, Ed then said that just standing here would not fix that broken magic engineering item. If left like this, It could be that most new students would enter Class A. It would be too much. So they had to handle this immediately. Ed was confident that they could definitely handle this. Clebius was quite surprised to hear his confidence. But what made him more surprised was when Ed suddenly put his arm around his shoulders. Ed continued, "But that's only if the gloomy Clebius intervenes." Clebius could only be surprised to hear that. It was clear from his face that he didn't seem to agree. At the starting point of the location of the new student placement exam, the entrance to Mount Oron, a question arose. When does one really feel he has arrived in the land of knowledge, Sylvania? If you ask that to Tanya, she will answer, when she is greeted directly by the noble students who are destined to meet her. Although the princess and the chancellor or something like that are students of Sylvania, they all wear the same uniform and ignore the status they have. But there is one exception to this unwritten rule. That is when the spiritual leader of millions of Telos believers, Saint Clarice, finally entered Sylvania. Those noble students even bowed simultaneously when she walked past them. Seeing that, with a bright smile, Clarice thanked them, but she asked them not to be so formal. She said if they followed all the formalities, their academy life itself would become tiring. So, for her sake, Clarice asked them to please minimize their manners a little, although she said that. But it was certainly difficult for them to do so. Clarice then turned her head when someone respectfully greeted her. It was Tanya. Tanya then introduced herself to her. Clarice was quite surprised to hear that she was from the Roth-Taylor family. She then smiled at her. She said that Crefin, the current patriarch of the Roth-Taylor family, was baptized by her. But she was too young at that time, so she didn't remember much. Hearing that, Tanya said that it was a great honor for her. She said that she would also ask for her baptism when she grew up. Clarice said that she was looking forward to it, although Tanya was so polite and respectful to her. But she certainly had a thought when suddenly greeting her like that. Meeting the saint in front of everyone was the perfect exposure to help her in the election of student council president. But the main event of the day is still, right at that moment. The new students were then surprised when they saw a firework that flew into the sky, then exploded so majestically. They knew that it was a sign of the start of the exam. The new students then simultaneously began to move when they saw it. The combat faculty was in the student square. The magic faculty was at the entrance of Mount Oron, and the alchemy faculty was in the basement of Obel Hall. The location of the gathering and the content of the exam varied depending on the faculty, but the goal was the same. That is, to get into Class A, full tuition exemption, the right to live in Ophelis Hall, free access to student welfare facilities, and a great honor. Those are the things that students get when they get into Class A. The students took the exam very eagerly. They felt very happy when they found a magic stone and went straight to the location of the altar of substitution. They thought that if they put the magic stone on the altar faster than others, they would be able to enter Class A. They even felt unacceptable when they were raced by other students. The thoughts of the new students were based on the motivation to aim for the top position, while Tanya herself now felt very suspicious when looking at the magic stone. The number of magic stones was too much. She was sure that what they had to do was not just put this thing on the altar. There must be a device that had been installed that made the difficulty of this exam increased. Realizing that, Tanya then decided, instead of wasting her stamina, she would do it slowly and stay alert. But she was then surprised when she heard a scream near where she was standing. It turned out to be from a female student who ran towards her. Seeing the female student's shoes off, Tanya wondered, did she slip? She then politely asked her, "Is your leg injured? If so, I can help call a staff member." But the female student denied it. She said that she just wanted to feel the direct touch of snow with bare feet. She felt very happy when she felt the cold sensation coming from her feet. Tanya could only be stunned at that. She didn't understand why she was doing such a silly thing here. The girl innocently asked, was she not allowed? Did it feel strange? She said that she wrote this on her wish list. She had only imagined it, but it turned out to be softer than she expected. Seeing her innocent face and silly behavior, a conjecture then popped into Tanya's head. She wondered, did she bump her head after the exam started? She felt very sorry for her. Tanya then introduced herself to her. She felt like they were in the same class. The girl was quite surprised to hear that she was from the Roth-Taylor family. She heard that all the members of the Roth-Taylor family were prominent because of their high status. Hearing that, Tanya then immediately said that not all of them were like that. She could only feel confused hearing that, Tanya explained. No matter how high the status of a family was, if the bloodline lasted too long, sometimes there was a scum, or even an insolent shithead born in the family. Tanya was of course referring to Ed, but the version of Ed she saw in the camp that time looked much different from what she remembered about him. She still didn't know what Ed Rothtailor's true nature was. The fear he had instilled in her at that time still hadn't gone away. Hearing that, the girl stammered that she didn't seem like that kind of person. She then remembered that she was just someone who came from the countryside. Since she came from the Rothtailor family, she wondered if she should show her respect. Tanya said that she didn't need to do that. This was Sylvania. Hearing that, she then realized she agreed with her. This was Sylvania. She then introduced herself to her. Her name was Kylie Ekney. She was from a small city-state called Eastern Terrene Republic. She said that she wasn't used to the way the world works. If she did do something strange, she apologized in advance. She wasn't used to places like this. Hearing her formal tone, Tanya said that they were in the same class, so she asked her to talk to her informally. Kylie understood. Tanya then asked her to hurry up. This is an exam? Kylie finally remembered that. She said that she didn't really think about her score. Getting into Class A would make her look too conspicuous. Tanya could only feel annoyed by that. She was annoyed every time she heard her response. But then she was surprised when Kylie suddenly grasped her hand. Kylie said because she was not too interested in the exam, so she decided to help her. That way, they would get closer right. Kylie happily said that this was her first time having a friend her age. Seeing her enthusiasm, Tanya told her to be aware. She could behave like that only because she was with her. If she carelessly got along with someone like the princess or saint, she could get into big trouble. Kylie didn't seem to know that at all. When Tanya was about to emphasize it once again, she suddenly abandoned her intention. She was tired. She then invited her to, let's just go. 30 minutes after the exam started, a student who had found a magic stone earlier was now panting. Climbing the mountain, he felt very happy because he thought he was the first. Just a little more for him to reach the top of the mountain. He also mocked his friend Joseph, who was racing him earlier. No matter how good he was, his stamina was still better, but he felt very tired at this time. Running at full speed was a bit too much. He felt so tired that he felt almost dead. But what he didn't realize was, there was a monster-like creature that had set its sights on him at this time, and before he could react, the monster then violently hit his face, looking at the student who was now lying on the ground unconscious. Clebius, who pretended to be the monster, tremblingly cursed. He felt that it was really scary, he complained. Why did he have to suddenly jump out like that? He also reproached his behavior just now. He felt that it was a little sneaky. A senior should not do such a cowardly and pathetic act. Even so, he did not expect. He turned out to be able to handle this, as he said. At that time, when Ed suddenly mentioned his name, Clebius hysterically said, "Why does it always have to be me?" Hearing his complaint, Ed calmly said that this time it was not just him. A powerful explosion was created at the place near the top of the mountain. It was Anis's doing. Ed at that time asked Clebius and Anis to block the new students from reaching the altar. If any new students managed to break through them and reach the altar, then they were entitled to enter Class A. Anis agreed to his plan. She felt it was her responsibility for damaging the purple disc, so she would give her best effort. As for Onyx, who was an expert in flying magic, Ed asked him to be in charge of safety. He would secure the new students who had been injured. As for the documents related to the exam content changes, Ed then asked Assistant Professor Claire if she went to submit it immediately, she would be able to complete it when the exam was over, right? Claire could only feel depressed hearing that. She realized that she would not be able to sleep again later. Ed then explained again their respective assignments. Assistant Professor Claire would handle the documents. Onyx is in charge of safety. Clebius would guard the southern entrance, and Anis would handle the northern entrance. Hearing that, Anis then asked, "What about him?" While looking back, Ed said that he would stay here. He will protect the altar. That means he will be the last line to prevent the new students from entering Class A. Hearing that, Claire then felt worried for him. She knew that his mana had not fully recovered. She asked, was he sure it would be okay? Ed just said that he had a plan. Seeing the three of them who were so totality in carrying out their assignments, Ed then felt calm. There seemed to be no problems. He then picked up the broken purple disc earlier. It was a magic engineering item that could give off the illusion of a powerful enemy using the user's mana. But since it was broken, it couldn't function optimally. Ed planned to repair the item, but he realized that repairing the purple disc alone was difficult. Plus, his mana still hadn't recovered. But he was now living in Sylvania. The magic stone that was just used as an exam subject was something expensive. It was an item that contained a large amount of mana. Ed then placed the magic stone onto the altar. If he placed something containing mana onto the altar, it could extract its mana as a temporary use. By using this altar, he could replenish his mana, although it took quite a while. While Ed was waiting for his mana to slowly replenish, Mug suddenly appeared at this time. It seemed to say something to him. Ed smiled. He then greeted it. He said that he couldn't hear clearly what it said. Anise and Clebius would buy a little time for him. He also still had a lot of magic stones. Their goal was not to let a single new student pass. Ed exhaled for a moment. He silently invited them to come. All his preparations had been completed at this time.
Time continued to pass. One by one the students then fell as they moved towards the summit. They seemed unable to overcome the first obstacle that faced them. There was also Tanya. She was still with Kylie. Her face looked nervous when she saw the terrible creature in front of her. The terrible creature was certainly Clebius. He felt a little tired at the moment. He didn't feel so good, so he decided to end this as soon as possible. But a very powerful explosion was then seen somewhere behind him. When he looked back, he then knew that the explosion came from the northern entrance. But what confused him was, it didn't seem to be from Anissa's magic. In his moment of distraction, Tanya didn't waste the opportunity. She then invited Kylie to immediately run away from there. Seeing that, Clebius then anxiously told them to stop. At the northern entrance, Anise didn't seem to be in good condition at the moment. Anise was indeed talented enough to be called a specialist academically and practically, but her combat ability was only slightly above average for her grade. Even so, it was still impossible for the new student to match her. But the new student in front of her at this time was of a much different level. He was Joseph Whitefelts. He still looked quite relaxed despite making H condition look so bad, unlike his older sister who had to endlessly strive to become the head of the alchemy faculty. Joseph obtained a research degree at the Magic Academy at a young age and is able to use intermediate magic at will. In short, he was a genius. One of the most worthy candidates to be the best student in his grade. Seeing her standing with her head down, Joseph then comforted her. He told her not to be so frustrated. He was sure she must also have her own field of expertise. It was just that she was not suitable for combat. But Anise said that he misunderstood. She did feel frustrated, but not what he thought. She then invited him to go up. Joseph understood. He then continued his journey to the top of the mountain. Seeing a student who managed to pass her, Anise could only stay silent with her hands shaking. She put on a perfect face, acting as if everything was under control, but she destroyed the magic engineering item, and made things worse, and she couldn't even think of a solution. And now, despite the big mistakes she had made, that person was the one who was trying hard to solve everything. Without the slightest feeling of anger, he guided the discussion in a constructive direction, while she herself lost against the first-year students and failed to block the entrance to the altar in the north. But rather than this feeling of defeat and frustration, she was more angry with herself. Because the first face that came to her mind was his face, who was always reliable and always managed to overcome the situation. Seeing Joseph in front of him, Ed said that he was his first guest. He asked him, "You know the exam rules, right? You just have to put the magic stone that you have brought to the altar, but, of course, I won't let you do it that easily." While walking towards him, Joseph said that this exam method is indeed strange. He asked, if he beat him and successfully put the magic stone on the altar, then who will test the students behind him after this? Hearing that, Ed just said that it was not something he should think about. Joseph agreed with that. He was sure he must have a plan for that. To be honest, Joseph was not very curious. He just used this time to understand the situation. Seeing an item placed beside the altar, he knew that it was an illusion disc, but the color was different from what he knew. He wondered, was it the upgraded version? He felt that he should be more careful. When he saw Ed, he felt like he was from the magic faculty, but he didn't feel any significant mana coming from him. On the contrary, he even felt that there were traces of the use of magic stones offered to the altar, using magic stones to fight him, the first challenger. That means his mana amount is quite low. He felt quite disappointed with Sylvania now. He thought he could learn something here. He even felt like he better think about what sandwich he should eat later. When Joseph used intermediate magic, focused explosion, a large explosion then appeared where Ed was standing. Casting it isn't fast, and requires a lot of concentration, but once it's done, it's almost impossible to avoid. unless we dodge first by reading the direction of the opponent's hand. Preventing it is almost impossible, but he was then surprised when he saw Ed, who apparently managed to avoid his attack. He felt he must have a decent combat experience. Ed then cast a magic. Judging from the flow, Joseph knew it was fire magic. Considering the level of mana that he has, it seemed to be between ignition or scorch. Scorch would spread its flames in all directions. Judging by the way the magic flowed downwards, it was ignition. Ed then threw the fire magic towards him. Joseph looked quite surprised when he saw the magic. The size of the fire was bigger than he expected. He had obviously trained this basic magic hard. He felt he could even use intermediate magic, but it was useless when the blazing fire was about to fall on him. A transparent shield then appeared to protect his body from the flames. Joseph's face was still as flat as ever. He knew, no matter how great the ignition was, it would not be able to penetrate his defensive magic. In a battle between mages, the final result often depended on the difference in the amount of their mana. If their mana consumption was more or less the same, then his victory would be guaranteed because the amount of mana he had was more than him. Joseph felt that it seemed that Ed did not have much experience in combat magic itself. Once his mana was exhausted and he could not maintain ignition, then he would lose after not being able to stop his magic attack. Magic duels are complex and profound, but he then got a new view in magic duels. Ed then called out to him. While slowly approaching him, he said to him, "The defense magic circle can indeed block magic, but not physical attacks." Just as he said that, he then attacked him using his feet. Ed then gave him a lesson that he would remember for the rest of his life. Just because he is a mage, it doesn't mean he will only fight other mages for the rest of his life. Joseph then retreated to open distance. He was confused about how Ed could penetrate his fire without getting hurt at all. He then said that he would not let his guard down. He then recast his magic. He would cast intermediate ice magic this time, while Ed himself was still using ignition to attack him. Joseph was quite confused by that. He wondered, was he trying to make it react to his ice magic? He guessed that Ed was planning to obscure his vision with steam and do tricks like before. After realizing that, Joseph then changed his ice magic casting to fire magic. He cast the basic magic, scorch, and threw forward to block the ignition. When his vision was blurred with only flames that he could see, he was then surprised when Ed suddenly appeared in front of him. The reason Ed didn't get burned after crashing through the fire magic they cast was because of the effect of the protection of the fire spirit, which temporarily increased his fire resistance drastically. When Ed was about to thrust the dagger in his hand towards him, Joseph then quickly cast physical defense to block his attack. It was a magic that could block physical attacks. Joseph was really shocked and confused at this time. He didn't know where he pulled out that dagger, but he was still confident that he could win at this time, because he realized that he was faster at casting magic than him. But he was then shocked and confused when he saw Ed suddenly move back after sticking the dagger on his shield. It was not an ordinary dagger, but a dagger that he had infused with the spirit formula, Explosive Star. Ed then called Mug. Right at that moment, the dagger then exploded, which created an explosion so large that it flew Joseph up. Joseph was unable to control his body after being hit by the explosion, and could only let his body hit the tree behind him. Although his condition was very bad at this time, but Joseph did not just give up. He told himself not to lose focus. He realized there was no way he could cast basic magic faster than him. Looking at the dagger, he then knew that it was spirit magic. It was not an explosive magic but spirit magic. He was quite confused why he could penetrate the scorch without getting hurt earlier. But if it was with the protection of the fire spirit, then it made sense. He deliberately hid his spirit in flames, magic, spirit magic, and even magic engineering item that he had not used. Joseph was confused. Who exactly was this person? While putting down the magic stone he had been holding all this time, he then admitted defeat. Hearing that, Ed then slowly walked towards him, and when his attention was distracted by the magic stone that rolled away, Joseph did not waste the opportunity. He then cast intermediate magic, Ice Spear, and threw it towards him, but his attack could be easily avoided by him. But Joseph certainly would not give up until then. He then rushed towards him, and punched him right in the face. There was absolutely no panic or anxiety on Ed's face when Joseph managed to hit him. Joseph, who spent his entire life studying magic, his punch should not have been able to hit him, except, Joseph was then surprised when a strong wind suddenly appeared around him. A guess then came to his mind. It was exactly what he thought. it was the protection of the wind. When Ed was hit by an unexpected attack, the enemy would bounce with the wind. Right after that, Joseph was then bounced far backwards due to the push of the strong wind that appeared. It was not a gentle attack. The attack created an effect like splitting the ground it passed through. It pushed Joseph so hard that it knocked down the tree he hit. He was completely battered at this time. It was even difficult for him to move his fingers at this time. He admitted defeat, accompanied by the breaking of the magic stone he was carrying. Joseph then lay on the ground helpless. Ed then praised him. His performance was very good earlier, especially at the end. It was a pretty solid decision. He was almost hit. With a limp tone, Joseph then politely asked him, "What is your name, Senior?" Ed then walked slowly towards the altar and leaned himself there. He then answered his question. "My name is Ed Roth Taylor." Shortly after that, Onyx then came while carrying Joseph, who had been injured quite badly. Seeing that, Ed then begged for his help. Onyx signaled to him that he could rely on him. On the way back to Sylvania, when they were sitting together in the carriage, Ika then confusedly asked Zix, "Why did you choose to enter the magic faculty?" Hearing that, Zix was confused why she suddenly asked that. Ika said, if he entered the combat faculty or the alchemy faculty, he would have been a top-ranked student already. This bothered her a lot because she thought he had sacrificed a lot of benefits because of her. While smiling slightly, Zix said that he didn't really care about being a top-ranked student. He was also sure that he wouldn't be a top-ranked student even if he got into the alchemy faculty or the combat faculty. At this point, the top-ranked student in the second year of the combat faculty was Clebius Nortondale. Zix wasn't sure that being the top-ranked student of the combat faculty was because of him, but Clebius, whom he highly praised, didn't seem to be in a good condition at the moment. In a semi-conscious state, Clebius wondered what had just happened. He then vaguely saw the silhouettes of several people in front of him. One of the people worriedly asked, "Is he okay? Is the holy magic too strong? There are no broken bones, right?" Right after that, Onyx then came and told them to leave this to him. They can continue the exam. Seeing Clebius' bad condition, Onyx then anxiously shook his body. He asked if he was okay. He told him to wake up. But there was absolutely no response from Clebius. Just before Clebius lost consciousness, he cursed. How could anyone block that kind of attack? Time continued to pass. Now only 20 minutes left until the exam was over. The people who faced Clebius earlier turned out to be Tanya and Kylie. The two of them have now reached the top of the mountain. But Tanya was then shocked when she saw the scene in front of her. There were many new student bodies lying there with Ed leaning comfortably on the altar in front of them. She did not expect it to be him who was the last examiner. He was the person she used to fear and hate, the person who had planted bad memories in her life. Seeing the arrival of the two of them, Ed then told them to just give up. Saintess Clarice was blessed with two dreams. In the first dream, an old priest said to her, "Glory comes from the strong beliefs that one holds throughout one's life." That was the belief he believed all along. One must be as clean as a blank sheet. The dream she got during the day was embedded because of Archbishop Verdio. And for the other dream, in that dream, she heard a song from a dreamer. When she opened her eyes, she then saw a girl with a musical instrument in her hand. The girl sang a song, "I would rather die in the mud than live as a blank sheet." Even the pure white sanctity that humans erected, the symbol of that soaring splendor, in front of the cliffs of Mount Ramerlan, it was just a sand castle, the green mist of the Denkin swamp, and the golden fields of the royal city of Cloeron, the green pastures of Fulland, the land of farms, the rough smoke of Crete, the land of alchemy, the red roofs of the commercial city of Odek, the turquoise knowledge of Sylvania, the land of knowledge, past the orange sands of the Dressadia desert to the purple shadows of the land of freedom Coelton. Plain white is just a small part of the beauty of all the diverse colors. The girl is Adele. She used to be a guardian of the holy fire of the church. After leaving the church, she called herself the Romantic. No one knew how she could pass by the buildings, but when nighttime came and the world was asleep, that girl always sang outside her window. The dreams she had when night came were about the outside world, whispering next to her only friend as they looked at the stars in the night sky. Adele at that time said to her, "Do you know that living an ordinary life like attending classes, playing with friends, and loving someone has its own glory? Just one hug from someone who loves me so much can be more valuable than the prayers of millions of people who admire me." You know, after leaving the church, she studied in Sylvania, and when the holidays came, she would travel the world, just like now. after she left, Clarice always walked to the places that Adele said in her dreams every night. At the end of her dreams, Clarice would hug someone tightly, and the journey that she used to take alone was now accompanied by someone, a journey filled with fiery colors. In stark contrast to her plain white life like a blank sheet, was the greatest fantasy she could imagine. In the process of disguising herself as Kylie, Bertio at that time asked her to always be careful in her behavior so that her true identity would not be revealed. She should always carry that magic engineering item in her hand, because if she always carried the blessing of sacred law, it could at least give her peace of mind. Hearing his caution, Clarice said that she was sure that no one would be suspicious of someone who looked so different. Hearing that, Verdio only said that there was no harm in being cautious. In Clarice's opinion, going to the academy on the church's terms was a natural deviation. Sitting on a bench along the tree-lined road near the faculty building, with no eyes watching her, that alone made her heart race, and made her feel very satisfied. No heads bowing to her, no pairs of eyes reverently adoring her, at least, no one in Sylvania, who would ever have thought that Kylie was a saintess. No, actually there was one, that person is Ed. They looked surprised when they found out that he was the last examiner. This was Clarice's first time meeting him. In a rather polite tone, Ed then asked them to leave him alone, but if they still wanted to lunge, Ed invited them to try. He then released such a powerful energy that affected the surrounding area. The two of them looked overwhelmed in the face of such a burst of energy. Tanya felt very surprised at this time. Even the students who had dedicated their entire lives to practicing spirit magic would not be able to do this. This level was far beyond the ability of alumni students. Even veteran spirit sorcerers who can handle 5 or 6 intermediate spirits will be impressed when they see this. Seeing the wolf-shaped spirit behind Ed, Tanya was shocked. She knew that it was a high-rank spirit. Clarice then anxiously suggested to Tanya to just give up. They have to think rationally, from any point of view. But she was a little hesitant to finish her sentence. Even so, Tanya knew what she meant. She also agreed with her. When she saw the high-rank spirit, the trauma she got at that time was now crawling back into her head. But, she didn't want to accept this. If she retreats now, it means nothing has changed, right? She then told Clarice that she might not understand this, but she wouldn't give up. The noble status and power had a heavy responsibility and burden. She still remembered clearly what happened 2 years ago. In fact, what we can achieve has a limit. Someone who previously sucked at casting basic magic can suddenly directly control high-rank spirits. Tanya was sure that this was just a trick from Ed. All she had to do was defeat his main body. But her guess was then broken right at that moment. When Marilda exhaled, a very strong wind then came out of her mouth and blew them both away. Tanya was shocked by this. Although she found it hard to believe this, but she couldn't help but believe that the wolf behind Ed was a real high-rank spirit. They were blown very far away by the strong wind. Clarice was shocked when she saw the figure of Tanya's brother. Clarice had always had a fantasy about nobility, neat appearance, warm smile, and elegant demeanor, but when she heard that this man, who seemed to be the opposite of all those things, was Rolf Taylor, she was immediately convinced that this person must be that bastard. She did not know much about the world outside of chastity, but when she heard Tanya say, no matter how high the dignity of a family, in many generations of descendants, there are bound to be scum and insolent bastard born, she could feel Tanya's grudge against that bastard when she heard her words. Clarice then slowly got up. She asked Tanya to follow the original plan and target his main body. With a smile on her face, she said that she would act as bait. She had told her that she was a bit unusual, so she told her not to worry, she wouldn't die, except, even though she said that. But Tanya still had doubts. Even though she didn't die, but she would still be hurt, right? She said she wasn't even interested in this exam. Hearing her hesitation, Clarice asked her, this guy is so bad, right? Besides, she then turned to her and said that she was her first friend in Sylvania. Tanya was stunned to hear that. Normally, she would have rejected such nonsense, but on her way to the altar, she saw something. The senior from the combat faculty, who lunged hard at them, was suddenly battered when hit by an unknown beam of light. It made her wonder, could it be that she had some kind of special power? More surprisingly, the usually silent Kylie intervened directly. It made her confused. Has she always been this brave? But she was then dumbfounded when she saw Kylie running towards Ed with tears running down her eyes. Although her face was not convincing, but her bravery was commendable. Marilda did not feel worried at all when she saw someone rushing towards them. She then casually attacked towards her, but she was then shocked when she saw that her leg was injured when she attacked that person. A yellow-colored barrier was seen enveloping Clarice at this time. It was the blessing of sacred law. Any aggressive entity that tried to attack her would trigger high or intermediate level sacred law magic. Marilda then screamed in pain when the yellowish light enveloped her, but she was a high-rank spirit not without reason, even though she had been hit by sacred magic, but she could still fight back. Clarice's body was then blown away when the strong wind triggered by Marilda fell on her. Ed just stared at the whole incident with a flat face. He asked, "Is it over?" But his sister then answered him. She asked, "Do you think I will give up that easily?" Hearing that, Ed then looked to the side, towards his sister who was now beside him with wind magic in her hand. It was basic magic, emission. Tanya then released the magic right at him. Ed's body was thrown very far due to being hit by emission from such a close distance, but his body suddenly showed signs of disappearing. Tanya could only be surprised to see that. A guess then came to her mind. She then saw the illusion disc that appeared where Ed's body disappeared earlier. Before she had time to react, several arrows suddenly rained down on her surrounding area. Tanya was then shocked to see that the arrows must have come from Ed. After showering her surrounding area with arrows, he then told her not to move. Tanya really couldn't believe what she was seeing at the moment. A person who couldn't even hold a sword properly could be so skilled in using a crossbow. She was also shocked when she realized that the arrow that Ed had thrown earlier was made of magic. With Ed aiming at her, Ed said that the shot was just a warning. Tanya's mind was in chaos at the moment. She was confused by the reality she was facing at the moment. She even wondered if he was really Ed Roth-Taylor. She really felt desperate at the moment. She could only sit limply on the ground. Tears came out of her eyes as she faced this helplessness again and again. This incident reminded her of the nightmare she had a few years ago. Just like before, no matter how hard she tried, as a child she couldn't do anything. Nothing changed at all. But Ed suddenly said to her, "You must have also tried your best." While picking up the magic stone she had dropped, Ed apologized to her. He had his reasons. Still, he couldn't be half-hearted in fighting her just because they were related by blood. He knew her nature. If he did that, he knew she would be even more furious. Ed asked, "I'm right, right?" Tanya confirmed it. Ed then said that she was impressive. If he became her, he would have run away without looking back, even though it was just an illusion, but he continued to fight it until the end. Tanya was stunned to hear that. Ed said that he came to see her from a new perspective. While smiling at her, Ed said he just knew she had such a side. Seeing his smiling face, Tanya then realized that she was wrong. Something had changed. Ed continued, "Although it was just an illusion, but you continued to fight me to the end. You can be proud of that." Tanya's eyes watered when she heard that. Ed then praised her that she was great. Tanya couldn't stem her tears anymore when she heard his praise, but Ed felt confused when he saw that. He wondered, could failing to get into class A make her cry this hard? Clarice then immediately came and hugged Tanya's body. She told him not to come closer, with a face that felt like crying. Clarice then warned him, "If you dare to make me your enemy or attack me, something very bad will happen. I'm serious, so don't move." Before Ed could respond to her words, he then saw other examiners such as Assistant Professor Claire there. Claire then called him and waved her hand at him. She told him that the exam was over. She asked him to come help her. Clebius was battered. Anise then complainingly asked Claire to please update the score list. She had a mountain of work and the student council election was right after the next semester started. Hearing that the exams was over, Clarice then murmured and breathed a sigh of relief. But she was then surprised when she realized that her voice had changed. Looking at her hair that was slowly lengthening and turning white, she wondered if the duration of the transformation magic had run out. Clarice was really panicking at the moment. She then remembered that the blessing of sacred law had been thrown away from her hand when she fought Marilda earlier. Verdio at that time told her that she should always carry the item at all times. Amidst Clarice's panic, Claire then praised Ed's good work, but she was then confused and surprised by what she saw in front of her. Clarice could not calm down at the moment. If this continued, then, her identity, and the school life she craved. But Mug then came to Ed while carrying the blessing of sacred law in his mouth. He gave the item to him. Ed then gave it to Clarice. He also asked her to be careful not to lose it again. Clarice was surprised by that. her mind suddenly went blank and didn't know what to say to him. Seeing Ed's bloody face and his shabby appearance, Claire then confusedly asked him, "What happened to you? Why are you hurt so badly?" Ed just said that he was fine. The sunlight in the sky was slowly fading, which showed that it was already afternoon. The new student placement exam was finally over. Ed had returned everything to the way it should be, based on the original scenario, except for one thing, a small and invisible gap that escaped his attention. While Claire was leading Ed while asking about his condition, under the red-painted sky, two eyes that resembled rubies were glued to Ed. Clarice realized, just now Ed seemed to want to talk formally to her but immediately stopped. While walking away, Claire said, "It seems that Ed is very tired." She then told him to just rest for now, let them take care of the rest. She then asked Onyx, who was now looking up while wearing a surprised face, to bring the Clebius. Onyx understood, he would be there soon. Looking at the towering altar in front of him, Onyx muttered, "I thought I saw something shaped like a person just now." He felt that it must be his imagination. Around the altar, Ed could be seen resting his body there. Marilda then said to him, "I believe that beauty beyond time and estimation really exists. The proof is in that sky. Even the most expensive artwork invites so many interpretations, and tastes are subjective. But everyone who sees that sunset will say that it's beautiful." Hearing that, Ed said that her language was difficult to understand. Marilda continued, "The point is, humans, they live a very short life, but they don't know how to be grateful for every single thing. Life without undergoing obstacles, empty and arid, is the worst curse for humans. You should be able to find meaning in even the smallest things and feel touched by ordinary things, right? If human life is compared to the 4 seasons, then the life of the spirit is like the infinite winter, empty and arid, with no change." "Marilda is a high-rank wind spirit," Janica said. "This one spirit does like to talk." Marilda continued, "Someone like you, who is very totality in smooth and doing things, tends to be unaware of yourself. Fainting from overwork and being injured constantly are the most obvious signs." Hearing that, Ed asked her, "So what?" Marilda said, "What I mean is, you should try to start dating." She was sure there must be someone sweet, cheerful, and even very close to him, someone strong enough for him to lean on. Marilda was sure he must not know that such a thing could provide great emotional support. Marilda then asked Mug, "Am I wrong?" With a respectful pose to her, Mug said that she was absolutely right. Actually, Marilda never made a contract with Janica, they were just friends. So, although Mug and Marilda did not directly have a superior-subordinate relationship like with Tarkan, but it seems that even high-level spirits can feel intimidation from her. Mug then said to Ed that Marilda's advice is sacred among the spirits, so why doesn't he just accept it, even if it's just to comfort her? Marilda then got annoyed at his words, seeing Marilda's dark face. Muggs then realized that he had misspoken again. He then said that he deserved to die. While holding the wings of Mug, who seemed to want to run away, Ed then asked Marilda, "Did you know, Janica seems a bit moody lately, do you know anything about it?" Hearing that, Marilda was silent for a moment. She then asked him back, "Why, are you worried?" Ed replied, "Isn't it natural?" Hearing his answer, Marilda said that she wouldn't divulge something that Janica herself was hesitant to talk about. Ed could only stay silent. Hearing that, while looking up, Marilda told him not to feel so anxious. It didn't matter if Janica occasionally went through the winter period. Everyone needed to experience it at least once in order to learn. The real world was not like in fairy tales. All they needed to do was sit still while waiting for spring to come. After saying that, Marilda then said, "Should we just end it here? He feels bad about wasting his mana more than this." Ed replied yes. Even in her small form, maintaining it was difficult. Hearing that, Marilda said that she was quite a perfectionist, but this form was the most efficient. Hearing that, Ed asked, "Is there any other form?" Marilda teasingly asked, "Do you prefer the more alluring female form?" It was indeed beautiful to look at, but she was sure she wouldn't be able to resist. Hearing that, Ed told her to forget it. He said that he just wanted to say that there didn't seem to be a big difference in terms of efficiency between her giant form and this tiny form. While throwing a stone at his head, Marilda said that it wasn't true, it was because his mana was balanced with mana stone, so he couldn't feel the difference clearly. She also felt that it seemed that his sensitivity was still a bit lacking. Marilda then asked him, "Do you really think only you hold all that mana alone?" She told Ed to think about it. A spirit at a level as high as her could not possibly make a contract with just one person. After saying that to him, Marilda then disappeared. Ed could only be silent seeing that. While going up to the altar, Ed then reflected on Marilda's words earlier. Ed realized that there was no way he could summon a spirit at such a high level as long as it only used his mana. But if not him, then who else? If you think about it, it's actually quite simple. The person who made the contract with Marilda besides himself. Seeing Lucy sitting on the altar in front of him, Ed then said to her that this was not a good place to take a nap. Lucy said that she didn't come here to take a nap. The cabin was much more comfortable if it was for sleeping. Hearing that, Ed then asked, "Then, why are you here?" Lucy was silent for a moment hearing that. She then said that she didn't like lonely cabins, so she just went for a walk, although the scenery up there looked so romantic. But unfortunately, at the end of the journey of the last Act 3, this is her final resting place. The altar of replacement. Clarice, who realized the will of the gods and the darkness of the saint, turned into the saint of unbelief. The apostles of Telos, who intended to punish Clarice, set off for the Arkan Island. At that time, the academy staff who did not know the truth, followed the archbishop's orders. The royal guard of Princess Phenia, the mercenaries of Lortel, the knights of Holy City Cathedral, the high-ranking staff of the academy, and also, even the raid party of the protagonist's generation and Principal Abel Photius joined in that tangled web. The tip of everyone's sword was equally pointed at one girl, who was trying to protect the Arkan Island. Following the last will of her master, a traitor, a heathen, whatever they called her, she did not utter a single complaint, as she watched everything from above with dignity. She was the awakened one, Lucy Merrill. She defeated all the great figures of the Arkan Island, and swept away most of the main character alone. But in the end, she was overwhelmed when her stamina began to run out, and was finally defeated by Taylor, who had mastered the final sword technique. In that moment, Lucy could only lie limply on the pool of blood flowing from her body. It was only after the truth was revealed that then everyone understood why Lucy tried to kill the god's apostles. Various thoughts then appeared when they finally learned the fact. So she wasn't a villain. We don't know there was a story like that behind it. However, saying such a thing would not change anything. Late understanding hurts more than any misunderstanding, whether it is because of her nature or she considers it futile. Lucy bore all the burden alone until the end, and of course, Ed had no intention of stopping her. As for sacrificing Lucy to keep the scenario smooth, Ed immediately rejected the thought. He was not so cruel to be able to do such a thing. After all, letting things flow naturally would not necessarily invite a bad ending. At the end of his life, Glock at that time said something to her. The saying goes, the ground becomes hard after the rain. Sylvania Academy will overcome most of its trials by itself, but there will be one trial that only she can overcome. When the time comes, Glock asked her to lend him her strength. Lucy cried as she held Glock's travelogue in her hands. It was a book that contained the story left behind by the master and his only family, the dying archmage. Only Lucy knew the weight of those words. She needed to get rid of those lingering feelings. It would be a long fight, with many dangerous events waiting, but it was all part of the scenario set for Act 3. Even so, that didn't mean he would just sit back and do nothing. Lucy then approached him and put her hand on his thigh. She said that this was something she realized recently. While lying on his thigh, Lucy said, "I guess, sometimes I might feel lonely." Ed was stunned to hear that. He then thought that he had to remember one thing. Next time, he should at least tell her if he was going to be away from the cabin for some time. In the rose garden, seeing Clara in front of her, Maya said that she arrived earlier than the others. Clara said that she couldn't wait to get out of that suffocating house. Clara was now carrying some kind of gift in her hand. She said that this was a gift for her. People often mistakenly thought that a niece was from a noble family, but it was actually Clara who actually came from a prominent baron family. Maya then thanked her for the gift. While stretching her body comfortably, Clara contentedly said that this place really felt like home to her. She really liked this quiet atmosphere. Apart from that, Clara said that she had to tell her friends at the academy. It had been a long time since she had seen their faces. She brought a lot of delicious snacks, and she had prepared a tea party with Anis and Janica as well. After saying that, Clara then said goodbye to Maya. She couldn't wait to see them again. There were so many things she wanted to talk about with her friends. And the blueberry pie she brought was really. After Clara finally left there, Maya's body suddenly became stiff. Anxiety could be clearly seen on her face at this time. When Maya thought about that meeting, she suddenly felt that the pie tasted like sand, and when Clara finally gathered with Anis and Janica, she was really confused by the atmosphere between the two of them. She wondered, why no one said anything. Are they at odds? Janica and Anise usually like to joke about everything, even small arguments. But this atmosphere was the first time it happened. Clara thought, should she make a joke? She then thought very hard for a joke that she could bring up. Clara was then about to call Janica, but before she could even say something, Janica suddenly called Anise. Anise immediately sat stiff when she heard it. With a sad expression on her face, Janica said, I heard you were hugged by Ed.